This week, a spiritual episode which calls out everything. I try to talk out the craziness of reality and ghosts. You may ask yourself by the end, is Ghost Guy Daniel on drugs? No, but I understand the confusion. You know, these episodes are never easy to do, but I tend to feel like I've accomplished more by the end. Like, I love doing history and ghost episodes, but when I do the spiritual ones, I mean, there's a certain feeling that comes along with it, and I would hope that you guys might have gotten something out of it as well. I mean, that's what keeps me going, right? The fact that I know that there's folks listening, and if they're getting something, whether it be entertainment, whether it be a new look on reality, you know, you're learning about history and ghosts, you know, then I've accomplished something. But when it comes down to the spiritual ones, I mean, they can go off on odd tangents. So for that reason, I will give a warning right here at the beginning. Some of the thoughts expressed in this episode can be deemed insulting and devastating to some worldviews. For that reason, listener attention is advised. Okay, it's out of the way. So let's start down this rabbit hole. I've always asked myself the question, you know, over the years, is why is reality the way it is? It really comes off as something crazy, and you might be saying, Daniel, I don't think it's crazy. Well, the reason is because you're used to it. I mean, we're born into this reality, we grow up in this reality, we see it as just normal things. You go outside, you see a tree, it's a tree. You know, you really have to go down into a deep rabbit hole of thought to really see things for what they are. Because if you can somehow force yourself to approach reality without that understanding of it being normal, it's ridiculous. And I think we know this deep down. I think all human beings understand this. We really are, unless we haven't discovered you know, the cryptids out there, the supposed mythical animals that exist hidden in the world. I believe humans are the only conscious animals. We are the only ones who can question reality and foresee our future, think about our past. Most animals in this world, they live in the moment. They only know what's in front of them in that time. And that's a really calm way to live. But unfortunately, we are saddled with these consciousness that can see the future and think about the past, so we gotta confront it. And one of the most difficult thoughts to deal with that most people fear more than anything else in the world is the thought of death. And I do believe that a lot of what humans do on this planet, in this reality, is based on fear of death. You don't want to have to think about it. You don't want to have to think about what comes next. You don't want to have to confront reality, because knowing that this reality that you are currently living in is going to eventually end. So that fear of death is one of the biggest stoppers in life. It's one of the things that causes most people to, you know, give up. Because if you're going to die anyway, then who cares? And this is why something that I've always found some comfort in, because, you know, I would never consider myself perfect. I don't think I fear death. I don't know why. Maybe it's because of my vast experience in the world of ghosts and the paranormal. I mean, you kind of have to confront death if you're going to believe in ghosts, if you're going to have these types of experiences with what happens afterwards. But the belief in the paranormal is belief that there is something beyond death. It's the same thing that the religion beliefs teach, the idea of going to heaven or hell. You know, not to say that there is a heaven and hell, but I'm saying it's the idea that you don't want death to be the end. I know in current times that atheists, they believe that death is the end, that beyond it there's nothing but darkness. And I don't like that idea. I don't think that's personally possible. You know, you think back to before you were born, I mean, it is darkness, you didn't exist. But I mean, there is something there. There's history in the world. You're made up of energy, which is something I'll talk about later on in the episode. And energy just doesn't disappear. Again, this is the unknown. What I'm stating is just personal opinion, but there's more beauty to other beliefs. And when I can look at a belief and say, okay, that sounds beautiful to me, that sounds like something that could be true, to say that it just ends and there's nothing afterwards, that doesn't sound right to me. Because why would that be the case? It seems everything in the world has its experience and then everything moves on. So then death is rebirth, and rebirth leads to death, and so on and so forth. So why wouldn't it be the same thing with the consciousness that give you what you're seeing in your reality today? It just makes sense to me. So I look at things like a belief in reincarnation. I believe originally this comes from the Buddhist quote unquote religion. It seems awesome. I mean, this one, I hope. I don't know. Nobody knows, but I hope reincarnation is a real thing. And for those who don't really like their life, or you might be living in fear, you constantly see all the problems around you, maybe reincarnation would be something that is fearful. But I can tell you right now that as somebody who's gone through a bit of a difficult life in my younger years and then eventually, come around to something better, I see life in a new way and approaching it from a positive, I'm just happy to be able to experience this. I'm happy to be alive. I'm happy to have the things, grateful for what has been given to me over the years. If you approach it from that point of view and don't live in fear and don't live in anger, then reincarnation may be beautiful to you as well. So if you don't know, reincarnation is basically the idea that after you die, there's a certain energy signature that was you, your consciousness. It then moves on to another physical being. So let's say a baby that's about to be born, your energy goes into that. Now, my personal belief is that, the idea of recycling, the idea that, your consciousness now is made up of many other consciousness, just like pieces that have been brought together by the world for whatever purpose. And that's what moved on in the reincarnation. So my thought is that when you move on to your next life, it's not 100% you. Let's just say what is 100% you is now moves on. It's like, 50, 60% of that makes up the new person. That's just a personal belief in the studying I've done over the years. I don't know if anybody else, like any other sages or monks or nuns, they share this belief, but it's just something that kind of has come to me over the years that's as a possibility that it's not 100% you. That, you just kind of combine with the energies that follow you through each one of those lives. That's not to mention the other thoughts of your relatives and your friends that you travel with in each of these lives, that you're all kind of like grouped together. This is another beautiful thought, is that, those who are around you, that your loved ones today, will follow you into the next life in different forms. So your father may be, your grandson in your next life, however that might work. That's a bit terrible example, but that's the idea. And I really think there's some beauty to that. But again, we don't know. I mean, there are books out there, if you want to look this up, about past lives where they talk to children from spiritual families. So children who are raised not to block out. Like, if they talk about, when I was alive previously, and the parents go, what are you, nuts? No, I mean, the parents would be like, what are you talking about? And then little Johnny will continue on with his story about how he grew up in a village called such and such, and he died because he got into a car accident or something. And they're like, how does this little kid who's like 5 years old have these amazing stories? All he's been watching is Sesame Street for the past, 3-4 years. I don't think there was a car accident and death in Sesame Street, was there? So you dive into these more, the families that are open to the idea in more spiritual countries, for example. And there's some books have shown where they've actually taken the child back to the village they said they were from, or the town or city, and they recognized things. They knew names. They knew people that they couldn't have possibly known because they're just kids. And for the most part, I mean, it seems like once they get up to 7 years old, seems to be the marker when all of these memories from the past life tend to fade. Even if you're really open to it, they tend to just go away, and then the kid continues on with his next life. So, I mean, there's some real interesting stuff in that, some real power in those beliefs for those who are open-minded enough to look into it. I've talked about that many times before, is that if somebody is, believing, oh, science is everything and there's nothing to do with the spiritual life, you're going to shut yourself off to these things. And yeah, I mean, some of it is ridiculous. There's a lot of stories out there are definitely made up, just people wanting to get attention. That seems to be the type of world we're living in today. But then there's a lot of them that are real, that can have proof put behind it and validity in the stories, and how the story progresses, like the kids who know the names of people in those villages or towns and know what happened, and then the relatives can confirm that somebody named such and such died in that manner, like 20 or 30 years ago, whatever it might be. I mean, you can have validity added to these things, and if you can get to the trusted sources, which is another difficulty, but you can find them, then who knows what you might learn. Who knows what your mind might be open to in the world. I was kind of touching back on the idea of groups. I think things in reality tend to repeat themselves, and groups is one of them. I mean, the idea that we're a social animal and we should naturally be attracted to being in groups and supporting each other and helping each other out. Again, confused in our current restless world, but this is how it should be. And I think like in society in general, if you dive into the material reality, the idea of a civilized society is what we need currently. This is what we need today. And the more connected we are and the less we fight, the better we all are. This is a useful distraction, I like to call it. If everybody in a group, a town, in a city think in a certain way, that's positive, that doesn't hurt anyone, that's the idea of helping everybody and raising them up, that is less about competition, more about cooperation, that this is a positive energy that lifts everybody up in a society. And it's a very useful distraction until a civilization, or in our case, a planet, becomes more enlightened. So when you become more enlightened and you think less of the lower vibrations such as fear and anger and sadness and hate, once you move beyond that and you become, comfortable with the idea of death, which I think is what drives most people into these lower vibrations in the first place, this is how a society advances. So you become to a level of being enlightened where those lower emotions, or emotions in general, don't affect you as much. And you get to another level where the ego, the piece of you that says that, you need to be something special, disconnected from the rest of the world. Instead of seeing yourself as a piece of a whole, that seeing your energy as being connected to everything else and everything else around you. This is the way to really move forward in a life, is to understand that you are connected, that there's a purpose for you being on this planet that doesn't come with you being better than anybody else. You play your role, you're part of a overall organism, and everything tends to move forward in your life in the way it should. You'll live a happy life, whatever that might be. You'll be grateful for what you have in your life because it could be worse. You'll look at other situations where people are living in fear and anger and in hate, and you'll feel bad for them. Almost like you've been let in on a secret that for some reason nobody else gets. And no matter how much you try and explain it to others who are really stuck in those lower vibrations, they won't understand. Because they'll think that that's how life is meant to be. So getting yourself to that certain point kind of protects you, your loved ones, and your life from spiraling down into that, because your energy will then bring them forward. They'll be attracted to you in that way, that you'll give off a certain type of energy that people will want to be around. They'll come to you for advice. I mean, the folks, when they finally hit rock bottom, they're always seeking wisdom from others, ways of making their life better, and then they'll know that you're there for them. So I mean, it's just you live by example. You can say things till you're blue in the face, but by living by example, that's the best way to show others the best way to live. And again, for some people, your way of living might not be their best way of living. Again, everybody needs to do their journey in their own way. But the idea, again, is not getting stuck in those lower frequencies. Okay, so now I've covered the idea of getting stuck in those lower frequencies. Let's go on to the reason that everybody's here, is the idea that reality is so strange. Because if you can get beyond the connection to the material, if you can get beyond the idea that everything around you is normal and see things for what they are, you'll realize what I'm talking about. Again, some people might hear what I'm about to say and think, oh, this is craziness. And yeah, no, I mean, it is definitely craziness. Everything about it is crazy. It's funny. I mean, you think that if people just saw how ridiculous and crazy reality is on its own, nobody would even need religion. You would need to have stories to kind of prove reality to you and they'll push away those supposed fears of death, because you'll realize that everything's kind of already taken care of. Okay, let's give some examples here. The one that always freaks me out the most is the idea of the Earth. I mean, just think about it. I mean, from our point of view, it looks massive. The idea that, the entire Earth has so many people, so many countries, so many places to visit. And I mean, if somebody wanted to go and travel, there's no way they could see every town, city, and country, and continent. There's just not enough years in a life. And I'm not talking about like past lives and future lives, just that one life that you're living today. So it seems huge. But just, you got to pull back that distinction and just see what it is. I mean, it is a massive rock, but we are a rock. We are a rock floating in the middle of nothingness. We are perfectly lit up and warmed by a massive ball of fire located in space. The sun, something we can never go and personally visit. We just know it's up there. I mean, that alone should freak you right the hell out. They didn't know what it did with me. I mean, I spent a lot of time meditating on this idea that, I mean, we don't even know what's really beyond our Earth. Pushing all the conspiracy theories aside, I do believe we've gone to the moon. I do believe we have like space stations out there. I know some people will say that those don't exist, but I believe that we've gotten that far at least. But then you ask, oh, are we going to go to Mars? Are we going to go to Venus or to the other planets in our galaxy? Even if we figure it out, like who knows if we'll ever get the humans out there, but robots definitely. But what do you think we're going to find? What do you think? I mean, it seems like we find proof that maybe there was life in these other planets, but was there really? Or are we just, the next version of what happens in the civilization? Do things shift in a certain way where life becomes more possible as you move down the line? Will Earth eventually be one of these dead planets, and whatever's next, it will look at us and say, oh, was there ever life there? How long has this happened? What is time really? How fast does time go by at certain levels? Sounds crazy, but have you ever watched the movie Interstellar? It kind of approached that. So I know there's like scientific thoughts and theories related that in certain environments that time can move faster or slower as related to other environments. So you ever watch the cartoon Rick and Morty? Absolutely love it. Everything but the most recent season. I haven't even bothered with it. But I mean, in previous ones, they had like Rick's battery in his spaceship was powered. It had this power source that never seemed to stop. It's because a society was living inside of it. So it seemed that time was on a different level from within a smaller entity than it was in a larger one. So I think that's the scientific theory in a nutshell, coming from a person, from a dummy trying to explain it. But is there realities larger than us looking? And from our point of view, it's been billions of years, but from there, it's only been like 100 years. Is that possible? Is that what reality is? Just, levels upon levels of different realities on top of each other. These are the crazy pathways that the mind will take when you start thinking about this stuff. So again, I go back to the warning, be careful. If you're going to start heading down this road, you're going to get those conspiracy theories. But certain things that you hear are going to sound like, maybe there's some potential to that. You're going to learn other things that will have connections to things that you learn. You'll be like, oh, I'm starting to get these values, this reality view that makes sense to me. And I do highly recommend that you do that. Even if a lot of the stuff that you believe ends up getting disproven in the future, down the line, you feel like you're dumb. At least you're, activating the brain. This is something you got to keep doing throughout your life, is to always keep learning. The things that are interesting to you, always go down those roads. Go into those rabbit holes. You don't have to tell others that you're doing it. You don't have to start a Ghost Guy Daniel podcast of your own and share to others who are going to say you're a nut. I'll do that. I'll take that one for you guys. But you don't have to do that. You can just kind of learn on your own. Keep it to yourself. Start a journal. It's like you're talking to yourself, but it's normal. So the idea of the Earth floating in the middle of nothingness, strange. The one that just I've been kind of learning a bit more is the moon. The moon is strange. You think about this. You got this tiny little quote unquote small planet that exists right beside the Earth. And did you guys know it doesn't spin? Yeah, I know. Supposedly there's something that's stopping it from spinning. So yeah, the moon does spin around the Earth, if I'm not mistaken, but the moon itself doesn't spin. So the Earth, it spins, and it also spins through the galaxy around the sun, but the moon spinning around the Earth doesn't spin on its own. It just kind of stays in the same position so that the bright side of the moon is always facing us, and the dark side of the moon is something that we can't see on the opposite side, but it never comes around. So the dark side always stays dark and vice versa. So this seems a little strange to me. Doesn't that seem strange to you? So the idea that the moon is something more than we think is that we just think it's a normal thing that should be out there. What purpose does it have? I mean, the sun obviously warms things and gives it light and life, but what does the moon do? It's kind of this strange thing that's sitting out there. And if you got the asteroids flying through space, and there's a potential, we get these little rocks and asteroids that end up hitting the Earth. Of course, there's supposedly the very large one that killed off the dinosaurs so many years ago. Why is the moon just kind of stationed out there? You got to start asking these questions. It doesn't make any sense. So then you start looking into the scientific things behind it, and nobody knows. I mean, our smartest scientists, maybe they have theories, but for the most part, nobody knows how it got there. There's no scientific theory of its origin. How did it end up? One of the ones I read was that a large asteroid had hit the planet, and that a piece of it floated back and kind of got caught in its orbit, and that's what created the moon. But if it was a large piece of an original thing that hit the planet, it would have knocked the planet right off its axis. So it would have destroyed it if it was that big. So, I mean, nobody knows. Nobody knows where the moon came from, the reason why it's there. And then they do a scientific study on it and find out that there used to be volcanic activity. And that even currently, there's water reservoirs on the moon. So there is water on the moon, and nobody knows how it got there. I believe it's frozen, but it's still there. So then you start asking these questions. I mean, there's so many crazy ways to go with this thought. Nobody really does it. I'm sure there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, but nobody really goes down those roads in the scientific community because they don't want to seem crazy. Because when your scientific proof is nuts on its own, when you start trying to make hypothesis of what this might mean, you're going to be considered a nut. So, like, is the moon, like the craziest one I've ever heard is that the moon is a alien base. You heard this one? It's gonna make me seem nuts. But it's an alien base that, so aliens, they live inside the moon. It's like their little spaceship that's is cloaked to look like a small planet or a rock, and that they live inside and they can watch us from there. There's a lot of these stories of the UFOs that have been seen and been videoed, and there's always been a thought that they weren't coming from other solar systems, that they've always been a part of Earth, and that they were here in ancient times, and that they've always been kind of like guiding humanity in a certain way. And I find that, super fascinating, but also it sounds like really over the top. So, maybe the moon is the way that they can just kind of sit there and watch us to make sure that we don't destroy the planet. I guess we're useful for resources, or they have like a sentimental connection to Earth and they don't want us destroying it for whatever reason. No, that's a crazy one. But again, I mean, it just seems like it's sitting out there, spinning around the planet, but not moving itself and just watching. It's all so very odd. How about this one? Air and water. Yeah, air and water. You might be thinking, oh, what about air and water? Daniel, you're going to ruin this for us as well? Yes, because, I mean, consider that they are both invisible. Yeah, they're just there, but are they really? I mean, air, that's the obvious one. You can feel it on your face when you're walking outside. And wind, I mean, you know it exists. The air, we breathe it in and out, but you can't see anything. From our point of view, it doesn't exist. I don't know, you guys. If it goes cold or hot, then you can see it. It seems to hold the ability to change temperatures. But again, it is invisible to us. Doesn't exist from a visual point of view. You can only feel it. It carries smells as well, so maybe you can smell it. So certain senses can pick up on this invisible stuff, but, we know it's there. And water as well is technically invisible. I mean, it changes light. So if it's in a cup and you can see it, you can see where it ends. If you look through it, it's going to kind of like skew everything around it because the type of material it is, the consistency that it is, that's how you can see it. But I mean, technically it's see-through, so it's invisible. And we need both of those things to live, to sustain our material lives. We need both of these invisible things. So if you look at it, and if you were new to it, it would seem strange to you. So how do all this connect to the idea of ghosts? And what is reality? Well, everything tends to come down to one level, and this level is energy. Everything in space, everything that exists, it's all energy. And if you haven't studied into the idea of atoms, see how everything is just made of different atoms vibrating at different frequencies, that if you get down to the nitty-gritty of everything that surrounds you, it doesn't actually exist, because most of the space inside of an atom is empty space. That what is it? Something like 99.999% of an atom is just empty space, and then there's energy that makes up the rest. So if science has proven that everything is made up of atoms, doesn't at that level alone make you realize how ridiculous everything is? I mean, you can guarantee through science, just with that thought alone, that nothing actually exists. That, whatever controlled us to become who we are, I think we personally even have control to change that, to change reality, because it doesn't actually exist. I mean, this is getting into that area that has been either beloved or completely considered crazy, is known as the law of attraction, if you ever seen the original movie The Secret. And when I first watched it, I realized there was something to it. That movie itself is a little over the top. Like I watched and I was thinking, okay, this is, really crazy thinking. But when you draw it back a bit and you realize that there is something to consciousness mixed with deep focus that actually exists. So science, through the quantum physics, is starting to prove this to be true as well, is that if you focus on something like a piece of energy, that you can manipulate it. That focus actually does mean something, that when you focus on it, it will act different than when you're not paying attention to it. So deep focus into certain parts of your life that you want to occur, no matter how crazy it sounds, I think will start building it. Best example I ever heard of this was when it came to dreams. So in a dream, you're 100% in control. And for those who ever had or are able to control having lucid dreams, I envy you, first off, because I've never been able to do that. But I've had them myself, and just remembering some of my dreams, I know I have full control. So if you're in a dream and something's happening, you say, oh, I need a sword in my hand right now to defend myself, it will appear. That's how dreams work. What dreams are, that's a whole other episode. But that's how they work. So when you come back to this quote-unquote reality, when you wake up in the morning, isn't just to say that, everything is the same type of energy. It's very possible we also have control of our reality. So on a personal level, you can think forward and say, okay, I want to have a nice job that I really enjoy, and I'm making such and such amount a year to support myself. And then you keep that focus throughout the years. You find yourself naturally working towards it. And as long as you don't stop yourself from moving in the direction that feels most exciting, that feels most calm and the best direction for you, as long as you don't stop that momentum, I believe eventually it will occur. It could take years, and you might give up in the process and then just say, oh, this stuff doesn't work. Sometimes it happens more quickly than others if you're meant to have that happen in that moment. But for the most part, even however long it takes down the road, that we do have control through that deep focus. And this is like a life lesson that I would give to everybody, is build that focus up. Now, our focus and our attention spans have been killed with social media these days, and I think that's a detriment to humans overall. Because if you can build up that focus and attention span to bring in the good things into your life and to help others and to do mindfulness thought towards others and lift everybody up at the same time, there's no limit to where humanity can go. And maybe those aliens on the moon will come visit us more often because they're not scared of us. I assume they're scared of us right now. So the final thought on that is we're basically in control. So when I sit back with that thought, that meditation, and you look at what's going on in the world these days, and I mean, there's so much fear and so much conflict and all these wars that are being fought, and everybody looks at everybody else and says, oh, you're different from me, and what you do is wrong and what I do is right. It makes me sad, because the entire world, overall energy, tends to be living in that fear. So fear is driving the world. It's making to think that we're not in control, and all our fears tend to come true. So by having the fears at such a high level, where so many people in this reality are feeling the same thing, thanks to social media, thanks to the internet, we're all interconnected, we're all hearing the same stories. Yeah, we pick our sides and whatnot, but it's still all based on fear. Both sides of the coin, whether you want to say right or left, if they're all feeling the same fear that, some war is going to happen in the future, then it's very possible we can push ourselves to it. It's the same thing with anything in this reality. If you fear it, it's very possible that it could come true. And we need leaders, we need speech, we need, thoughts put out into the world to counteract that. Because you don't want to have it all on one side, and the worst side, with fear that the worst things are going to happen, and then they do, and you can say, look, I was right. And not having the positive side, not having the side that says life is a gift, and there's, the creativities and the beauty that we could bring to it, it's a detriment. So we're all focused on fear right now. My hope for the future is that it will shift. I see some of it shifting happen. I see some, folks rising up in the world and gaining huge popularity that push the other side of it, the good side of it. So I do think we're going to be okay. I mean, you can see that counteracting balance is finally shifting again. We've gone through a very dark time. Things are finally getting exposed. Certain people who are pushing down humanity for their own gains are getting exposed. And hopefully that will shift to change. We will see that probably within the next few years, through the next decade. And by the end of that, we will know. I do believe it will end up on the positive side. But that's just me diving into some political stuff there. I can't avoid it, unfortunately. But the final thing I got to mention, of course, I mean, you are here for Ghost Guide Daniel, is how does this all relate to ghosts? Because, as I've always said, ghosts are energy. The idea that it's vibrating on a different frequency means nothing at all. So if it is possible that the energy that makes us up today can move on after death, if it goes into another child to be brought on to its next life, but usually there's a delay in between those. I don't know what happens into that delay. If you watch the movies, they say that you go to a certain place and you go over. You ever see the movie Defending Your Life? Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep? Wonderful movie. Some people, you go and you go over your life and you see all the things you did right and all the things you do wrong, and you learn from it before you move on to your next life. I don't think it actually happens in such a human manner, but I think in some cases it does actually occur. The whole strange phenomenon that your whole life flashes before your eyes before you die, like in a really tragic situation. Your whole life I think that can happen. If you die of natural causes, maybe it happens on a slower way. If you die in a tragedy and it's very sudden and unexpected for you, maybe it's very quick and then you move on immediately. But for those who get stuck in between those two processes, so the process of death and the process of rebirth, those can be ghosts. They can be spirits. Or on the other side of it, which I've argued for many times before, is that it's just left over. The same idea, that a spill on a floor can be left over. That energy from certain actions and certain emotional events can permeate a space. So like a haunted house can be a collection of these types of energies. If something that's really tragic, like the Amityville house, for example, then it remains. It kind of hangs over the house like a dark cloud. So these emotions are energies as well. So it's possible that a ghost is just a leftover emotion, which is AKA is a residual spirit. So when you get to that level of energy, anything becomes possible in reality and, of course, in spirits. Anyway, that's the show, everyone. Hopefully it wasn't too crazy for you guys. I love doing these spiritual episodes. I'm going to keep doing maybe once a month or something. If you don't like them, leave me a message. Let me know. Daniel, you're nuts. Every time we hear them, we shut you off. And we come back only for the history and the ghosts. I'd like to know. And also, if you want to support me, I have social networks finally on Facebook discussion page, on Twitter, which I believe is now known as X, which I'm going to start posting some more quick photos and personal thoughts and whatnot. You can support me on there. Please leave a review. Apple, Spotify, Google, however you listen, that helps as well. Thanks, and I'll talk to you next week.